I think there are ways that you can reach people through product that you can't reach them in person.
Are we recording?
Oh my God. Sorry. Better Product, the only show that takes a behind-the-scenes look into how digital products are created,
The business is built around them, and how you too can innovate better product. I'm Christian.
I'm Anna.
Welcome to today's show. We talk to a lot of companies who only have one product, but this week we're talking with Amy Reitz, General Manager of the Intersect product line at Hobsons, which offers a recruitment optimization platform for higher ed admissions offices. Amy shares how they reached a point as a company where they had 80 plus products, and they had to take a step back because their portfolio of products was in conflict and the story no longer made sense.
Among those products, there were a lot of conflicts. The story didn't make sense. The positioning was in conflict. Some of those products were winners, some of them were not, but they kept continuing on. And we realized as a company that it was time to really take a hard look at this expansive product portfolio we had and determine where can we be differentiated in the marketplace and how do we optimize our portfolio in a way that tells a common story.
And from what Amy shares, there wasn't just one reason why they decided to examine their portfolio. Part of the reasoning was that the education landscape was changing, but also,
whenever you're operating that many products, maintaining that many products, the costs of some of those products really outweigh, the impact that you're having. The third was competition, that some markets that previously for us had been very differentiated, in which we'd been the first mover in the market, had become commoditized. And so the question really became, does it make sense for us to be spending our energies there, or are there better ways for us to move forward?
So when you think about optimizing your products, it's completely different when you have one versus 81, which was a challenge she had to overcome. Going beyond the financial drivers for paring down, she shares how they had to ask themselves what their story and vision was and how they could differentiate. As a company, they approached this as a cross-functional endeavor and formed these tiger teams.
It's where you're trying to take your best people, with the most expertise, the most kind of creative thinking, and you're putting them together. I mean, you can think of it as like a working group or a SWAT team.
now they've got 3 clean product lines, but there wasn't a clear brand architecture, which is often an issue you find in a lot of scale-ups. A lot gets created, whether it's features or in this case products, and if you're not clear on the brand architecture or even the brand strategy across all the pieces, you end up with just having a patchwork instead of a framework.
So there is some value in thinking a little bit top down of what is your North Star vision? Where is it that you are heading? And making sure that as you're building incrementally, you're building toward that. And that's a big pivot that we had to make as a company, is really defining what is that North Star vision and how do we start to move everything in that singular direction.
Amy talks about this North Star vision, which she defines as a plan for the company's future based on the customer's challenges and what's happening in the market.
And this mission, or North Star vision, isn't something that happened overnight. It took time for them to decide what products to keep and which to exit. In our roles here at Innovatemap, we talk to a lot of companies who have gone through some kind of pivot, specifically as it relates to their original product market fit. What's interesting about our conversation with Amy is that they have a mature business line with a lot of legacy product lines.
For Hobsons, they started higher ed as an educational publishing business focused on admissions back in 1974. And while their focus is still on the admissions market today, they've had to reshape their products by trying to understand what the future of higher ed could look like.
The opportunity for Amy really boiled down to one thing: a mature product with an end user whose landscape is changing. So how did they balance the old with the new, and more importantly, the future?
The biggest challenge in that for us has been there's a bit of a fortune telling that you're doing with your own client base, where you're saying, hey, I know that these techniques that you're using are working right now, but I'm looking at how the demographics are changing in this country and they're not going to work in 5 years. When the enrollment pool kept getting bigger and you had more and more college going students, marketing really worked. Now the enrollment pool is shrinking. The growth in our population is mostly in underrepresented groups, and those underrepresented groups need more than what we're doing now in order to help them on their pathway. But that can be kind of a hard sell. You're having to get people to think outside of their box of what's working today versus what could actually work tomorrow.
What do you think is your product's role in leading that, and how do you actually work through that fortune telling through the product to your customers?
Yeah, I think product can be consultative in a sense. One of the advantages that we have, I won't say versus our customers, but compared to our customers, is we are looking across hundreds and thousands of institutions at a time and seeing what's working for some, what's not working for others. The collection of best practices and expertise that we've been able to take from that allows us to use product not just to react to the needs of what customers are asking for, but to help guide them in their decision-making process and help them find more effective ways to reach their goals.
How does that actually make it in the product?
I think it's a really cross-functional approach that you have to take. It's not just about building it into the product. It's about building it into your culture. Everyone needs to understand that, from support to sales to marketing, so that everything that we are doing has those best practices and engendered in them. But I think when it comes specifically to then product, it is really important that when you're going through the roadmap planning and then R&D and concepting and some of your proof of concept work, everybody that's involved in that needs to understand what it is you're trying to accomplish and what those best practices are. And if I look at the times when we've been most successful, it's when everybody really has that full understanding. It's when we get in a hurry to try and get something out the door, and you treat development, for example, as a task taker, where you say, hey, just go and build this, versus as really a true design partner in the process. That's when we've been successful.
When you take that leadership you're talking about and the knowledge that product has, and you get it out to your customers, how do you know whether you're successful or not?
It's a hard question to answer, right? And I have always been someone in my career who's been really metrics driven, and working in professional service, it was really easy to measure client satisfaction and utilization and to have targets that you are hitting. And there's certainly a number of things that we look to accomplish and that we measure. The thing I struggle the most with is balancing the direct ROI that I can show immediately versus that long-term ROI, especially when what you're trying to do is create kind of that horizon of where things are going. And I will say, I think our biggest challenge is doing that balance, right? That if I'm in admissions office, I need to make my class this year, right? And we certainly are helping admissions offices to connect to students who will be enrolling next year. But a big benefit of our solution set is also really starting to be able to create awareness early on in freshman and sophomore year. There's a time horizon to that. So what I'm really interested to see, so we as a business have really, Intersect is 2 years old, not quite 2 years old, it will be in March. And I want to see that long-term time horizon, and I'm not there yet. The other thing for me is that I have this belief that what we are doing is so much about match and fit, and that there are studies that show that a student who attends a college that's an academic match for them, but also is a fit for their interests and what they are looking for, are more likely to complete a degree. So something that we're looking at is this long-term impact of these students that we're helping connect to institutions that are the right fit for their interests. Do they genuinely retain longer? Do they complete their degree that they set out to complete? And what's difficult is that takes time. It's going to take them 4 years to go through that process. So you're having to try and balance, like, what immediate KPIs can I look at to show success, while also waiting to see those long-term results.
What do you think you will do? So I totally understand the long-term results. What will be your means of doing that? Do you go out in the field and talk to your customers? Do you have them do surveys? Do you have a team that's out there getting input? What would that process look like in a few years?
I think as much as possible, we try to build that into the product and our ability to collect that information so that we're able to do that en masse. I'm a big fan of surveys and getting input directly from clients, but that can be a little bit spotty and it can be a little bit biased. Generally, the people that are engaging in our focus groups and advisory boards are the clients who are the happiest, who are the most engaged. Sometimes reaching those that are not happy or that are struggling can and give you more valuable feedback. And if you're not collecting some sort of metrics within the product to look at ROI across all of your clients, it's hard to uncover that through user surveys alone.
What keeps you up at night?
So I came to product management less via this love of building products, although I do love that, and it's something that I've really come to enjoy about my job, but more as a passion for education. And so when I think about the work that I do as a product leader, for me, it's much more about what is the impact that I can have and what's my personal story and how I get there. And the thing that I worry the most about are the things that I think are the greatest advantages in my life and making sure that everybody else has them. And by the greatest advantage, I mean having this expectation that education should be a part of your life, and this expectation that I could go to college and that it could be a good option for me. And one of the things that I see happening as a country is we've had a bit of a backlash against higher education. We've stopped dreaming about higher education. It used to be seen as this beacon of social mobility that would help people advance to greater heights in their life. And because there have been a lot of challenges around higher education, it's not perfect by any means. So affordability is a huge issue for a lot of folks with higher education. Instead of really focusing on how do we address affordability, how do we make sure that underrepresented populations like low-income students, students of color, first-generation students, how do we ensure that they have access to higher education? We've started saying, college isn't for everyone. And I'm not one that thinks that college is for everyone, but we shouldn't be telling someone that college isn't for them. That's a very individual decision to make. And what I see the most is that the people that we say college isn't for everyone to are students of color. They're immigrants, they're first generation students, they're low income students. We're disadvantaging them right out of the gate by saying, well, college isn't an option for everyone. So as I think through products that we're building and what I want to do with my professional career, thing that I constantly worry about is how do we really as a country kind of shift that mindset back to college as something that we should be aspiring to and that we should be making available to all students.
Why is product a good medium for you to do that?
I think there are ways that you can reach people through product that you can't reach them in person. So something that I think a lot about with students who struggle with college access, and so those underrepresented groups that I talked about, is this idea of shame, that students don't often understand that the adversity they faced is actually what makes them stronger and what makes them capable of doing more. And when you have that, when you're ashamed about something in your past or your background, you don't proactively seek out help. And I think something that we have seen with technology is there is an openness and an honesty when I'm interacting with a technology product where I don't feel judged. And so I'm more willing to seek out answers that I wouldn't ask of somebody else. And so I think there's this really unique way that we can use product and technology to reach students who historically have not raised their hand and said, I need help, and to be able to connect them to other students and to be able to say, you're not alone in this. This is something that other people are going through.
So a lot of times when we talk to people in product, a lot of the questions that we ask about what keeps you up at night are product and business oriented, but you're thinking a lot about the higher mission. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on how you sort of see product's role in managing the business versus, sort of making sure that you're mission oriented.
When I think about the product management profession, there are so many things that we have focused on over the years of, how we have better processes, how we do better user research. And I think there is absolutely something to be said for the functional excellence of product management and how you continue to improve it. But when I look at products that have really had the most impact, those products are born from passion. And that passion and that mission is, what are your users trying to accomplish? What are their needs? And you have to be passionate about that. You have to want to help people accomplish what it is that they set out to accomplish. Because if you don't have that as a foundation, it's easy to get lost along the way.
What do you mean lost?
So we talk a lot amongst our product management and UX teams around this idea of, where we prioritize and focus our efforts, and are we doing something that's truly going to help people reach their goals? It's really easy to go down, for example, a rabbit hole of how beautiful something looks, but if it doesn't serve a functional purpose that really helps someone do their job better, or helps them make an impact or make their own life better, whatever it is your users are trying to accomplish, it may not be worth doing. So if you don't have that guiding passion for really helping your users, whoever they may be, in accomplishing what their mission, if you don't feel a common and shared mission with them, I think you can make good products, but you can't make truly great products.
What does better product mean to you?
I think to me, better product is impact.
That was Amy Reitz with Hobsons. Check out what they're up to at hobsons.com. That's HOBSONS.com. Or connect with Amy on LinkedIn. And now Anna and I are going to break down what we just heard. You ready, Anna?
Let's do it.
So Amy covered a lot of ground with her work at Hobsons. I'd like to start with one of the things that I personally took away from it was her focus on the mission of Hobsons and how that's sort of driving what they're doing today. Specifically, I contrast it with what I see a lot of legacy, 10 plus year old software companies. They have what they might say, old clunky product that they want to modernize or just refresh the UI. They seem like that type of company, except that she's not just comfortable like refreshing the UI. Like, oh, cool, here's a new product. It seems to be very mission driven. Did you get the same thing?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I think that you can't spend any time around Amy and not see how she's incredibly mission driven. But I think when it comes to Hobsons too, it's not just that they are thinking about, how are we updating our tech, or how are we, unifying our stack or whatever, but they're really looking at future demographic trends, how things are changing, how education itself is changing. I mean, my gosh, there's so many huge issues affecting education right now. And they're not just saying, we need to keep doing exactly what we've been doing, just better or faster or whatever. They're literally saying, how is the world changing and how can we change with it or support it or think differently about how we are serving students and how we're thinking about higher education, or even just thinking about how people achieve success in their lives, whether it be via higher education or just some other big shift.
A lot of companies this size start with user testing and just think, we need to test our product and see where it falls short and all of that. But I don't feel like she talked about any of that. I don't think that's what you're saying either. It's different than that. What type of research do you think is appropriate for a company like this that has a lot of products, a lot of history, but needs to change? Where would you start there if not for user testing?
I think one thing that Amy said that really stuck out to me is that she mentioned that she's not necessarily product passionate. She's education passionate. And so therefore, everything she does that's product oriented supports her passion for education. So in that way, I think really, a lot of, again, understanding trends, understanding demographics, how the world is changing, how education is changing. I think that's a really good place to start with, is to say, what is the world like that we want to operate in, and kind of moving backwards from there. A lot of times those big, we when it comes to just user research, we don't think about those macro trends because we're operating in next quarter, getting our NPS scores up. But they have these bigger fish to fry and bigger things to think about. And so I think that, it's really those bigger macro trends and how they are affecting just the industry you sit inside of.
She's almost mission oriented, and the product is the best way to help her complete the mission that's at hand. Do you think that this sort of mission-driven approach can work and for any other, the B2B software companies that we've had so far on the show?
Definitely. People can be passionate about anything. But I think that there are people who are really passionate about marketing software. I think there are people who are really passionate about, connecting salespeople. I mean, you can't, we know that Rod Foyer is very passionate about making sure that salespeople are enabled in the best way they are. And I think you can be really passionate about ensuring that people are able to do the best work that they can do. And so if you build B2B software, you might think, oh, well, I'm just enabling marketing automation. But at the same time, you enable someone to do a job well. And we know that when we can do our jobs well, it's part of us as people, as like a bigger, I'm like going really off the rails.
No, I think bringing up, you brought up Rod Foyer. It's actually a really good one. If we contrast that in a traditional sense, you say on one hand, there's somebody who's building software to help education get better. On the other end, there's a guy building software to help salespeople. Now we know Rod, so it's all good. But the point is that what you brought up with Rod is that there's noble missions in everything. And it's funny that you brought up Rod because he's also very mission driven. What he was doing with Costello, he had a vision for how salespeople could get better and do their jobs better. And yes, it's not education, K through college or anything like that. But he still was mission driven what he was doing. And he was talking about getting out, learning how salespeople want to sell, and having a clear vision for what the best way is to sell. Amy's doing the same thing in the education space. You mentioned before about the overlooked populations or the first generation. I know Amy talked about those changing demographics. She's paying attention to those things. And so now she's got this new vision for what something can be, and she's got to start leading the product down there to sort of execute on that mission. It doesn't really matter that it's education and there's something sort of moral about that. It just matters that Amy is mission first, and from there kind of cascades down throughout the product.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I think that's the thing we can all take from the way that Amy is doing this, is that she is looking at those bigger trends and saying, how are we a part of that? How are we fitting in with that? And I think we've seen lots of companies get left behind by not thinking about that, not seeing those trends. But also the fact that her team is so rallied around that as well. I mean, I think not only is she thinking about it, but her team is also very, very focused, her R&D team very focused on, working on that mission and being very mission driven. And I think that, she talked about how that really kind of helps them stay in line with what they're doing.
I'm glad you brought that up because we don't talk about aspects on team growth and company building a lot because we're focused on product here. But you're right, you have to focus on the mission with everybody internally, because until you have the product to support it, all you have is that mission. And even in their case, they might have the older legacy products. And if she goes to them with the vision of, okay, we're going to fix 20 defects, or we're going to increase, or decrease the amount of time it takes to do these, that's not really even if those things happen and that's a story that they have to execute on, that's not exactly something people can rally behind. And it doesn't get everybody going towards the same way, towards sort of revolutionizing education in the way that they're trying to do.
We've worked with Amy's team, and I think we've seen that, they are just as passionate as she is about education. And I think it's not only, maybe a company where you don't have product yet, where you're passionate about getting that into the world and making the world better. Also a bigger, older company where you're saying, we have this legacy product that we are now shifting. And I think that passion can keep you on board while you turn the cruise ship, if you will.
And I'm thinking about, again, Rod, the contrast between, we talk about a legacy product, but I don't know that anything that we're hearing from Amy is any less relevant to a startup. You have a mission, like you said, you have a mission, you may not have a product. That's a startup life here. And I think we hear the buzzwords of disrupting, or we hear about big companies needing to get innovative and disrupt themselves. She's kind of doing that, but doesn't really even speak of it that way. She's going and doing all the things you should do, which is pretend you've got nothing, get out in the field, see what the needs are, see where the market's shifting, and then come back and sort of make sense of it with what you already have and create a roadmap from there.
Thanks so much for listening to the show this week. If you haven't yet, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. Until then, visit innovatemap.com/podcast and subscribe to learn how you can take your product to the next level. As always, we're curious, what does better product mean to you? Hit us up on Twitter at Innovatemap, or shoot us an email at podcast@innovatemap.com.
I'm Christian.
And I'm Anna. And you've been listening to Better Product.
Better Product.
Drop mic.